All right, this is the 5th video of our 5-part video series, How to Be an Extraordinary Coach and Build a Thriving Coaching Business. And this discussion has what I think is the most powerful analogy of what transformation is in general. Super important to understand as a facilitator, and it has a couple really deep dive concepts that are gonna change the game for you as a coach. These are some deep conversations. And the ingredients and these two components, or the ingredients primarily, like they've kind of been building in depth and scope, you know, the bigness of them, because we're going down into foundation. That's why these concepts, these ingredients are bigger in scope, I think. So one of them is identities. Your identities are basically the roles that you take on in an attempt to do life, in an attempt to have relationships, in an attempt to feel loved, in an attempt to feel useful and productive and successful and all the things that we want, right? We all have needs, we all have desires, and we create identities in order to meet those needs and desires. It's kind of like putting on costumes, and the identities sort of work like different personalities. In fact, we think it's powerful and important to think of our identities as different personalities. Now, for some people, that might feel a little weird, or it might sound like we're getting into split personality disorders and stuff like that. But if you think about our identities as different personalities, it'll do so much with the positive kind of detachment that you need in order to maneuver in life, in order to manipulate certain things, in order to change certain things, in order to untie certain knots, in order to challenge beliefs and give yourself freedom. It actually helps to recognize that you are not your traits. You are not aggressive. You are not your labels either. You are not shy. You are not an introvert or an extrovert. Like at the core, you are not these things, but you've built up identities that do represent some of these things. So you might have labels that are operating, but usually certain traits, or probably any of the labels, are not operating all the time. So you might feel, or you might be more extroverted, let's say, in certain areas of your life, but not all areas of your life. You might be a lot more outgoing. You might be more shy. You might be more aggressive. You might be more bold in certain areas of your life. So our identities a lot of times are attached to circumstances. So in certain circumstances, we show up in a different way. When we attach ourselves to those behaviors or the labels or the traits, we're confusing who we are with what we do, or who we are with how we act. And those are not the same. They are feeding into each other. Of course, how we act to some degree comes from who we are, but how we act does not equal who we are. And who we are does not equal how we act, especially when we've got variation, right? So how can you equal boldness when you're not bold all the time? You're only bold in certain identities in certain circumstances. So it's really critical to provide the separation from who we really are and how we act, so that we can look at our actions and look at the programming that we have, and then change what needs to be changed. Because if we don't do that, then I think what most of us are running around thinking, because of what we've been taught or what we've picked up by all of our programming, is that the thing that should change is us. And if you are the problem and you need to change as a person for your life to work, that's going to be, I mean, number one, it's impossible. But number two, it's going to be miserable most of the time because you're always going to be the one that's at fault. You're always going to be the one that needs to change. Or if you don't want to change, you might flip that and demand that everybody else change because they're the wrong ones. But we're coming from this place of right and wrong, which creates adversarial relationships with other people, but also inside ourselves. And that doesn't help. Believing that we are right and wrong, or this is good and this is bad, and shoving ourselves into one box or the other, it's not a way to deal with humanity, because humanity is dynamic. You know, we tend to try to fit ourselves into rules that don't change, and we forget that as humans, we never don't change. We always change. Like literally, neurologically, our brains are not the same as they were yesterday. Our experiences are not the same as they were yesterday. So we as people are constantly shifting, and yet we tend to want to fit humanity into static rules. That'll never work. And as a coach, you'll never be able to help people who are different all the time with the same rules that you want to apply to everybody. It would be so much easier to do that, to just go, I am the coach. I have the exercises. What is your problem? I have a solution to your problem. You give me your problem. I give you my solution. There. Thank you. Pat them on the head and send them on the way. Right? That would be amazing to some degree if that's what coaching was like. And on some level, we want coaching to be like that. Our intellect wants coaching to be like that. But that's not the way coaching is, because we're dealing with humans. And so we're constantly maneuvering. We're constantly in flex with the changes of humanity. So I don't want you to get caught up in the right or wrong, good or bad dichotomy. We call this a zero-sum worldview, where things are either this or that. There's never anything in between. That will produce misery in all areas of your life. Rather than you being either this or that, or your persona being either this or that, I want you to realize that you've got all these different identities, and none of the identities by themselves are right or wrong either. So a lot of times we might have experienced something in a relationship that we didn't want, or some outcome that we didn't want. We had failure, we got rejected, or whatever. And then we take it to mean that we are the wrong one, or that our identity, not identity, but our trait was wrong, or our boldness was wrong, or some label that we've given ourselves is wrong. And so now we need to change that. And then we get into conflict with our identities, most of the time without understanding that we're dealing with identities. So rather than believing that your identities are right or wrong, good or bad, just ask yourself, are they producing what you want? Are the identities that you have, or the identity in any given moment that is showing up most dominant, is it producing what you want? Is it producing the connection in your relationship that you want? Is it producing the success that you want? Is it producing the fulfillment that you want? Is it aligned with what you want? Not is it good or bad, but is it aligned with what you want? If it's not aligned with what you want, when we have this dissection and detachment of the identities, then it's much easier to change. It's much easier to change identities, or to change a thing about an identity to be better aligned with what you want, rather than to say, this is good, this is bad, I am good or I am bad, and just live in that world of right or wrong. So this gives you a lot more flexibility to move as a human. And then as a coach, understanding this will do all of that. You know, all this gets transferred over to your clients, obviously, right? So some of the best work you can do as a coach is to help your clients notice their identities and separate who they are from the validity of their identities. And our identities are always just from the programming that we have. You know, none of us determine, I want this kind of identity. I want to be really good at this kind of sabotage. I want to really mess up my relationships by this. Like, none of us make that choice intentionally. There's no intention behind our identities other than meeting our needs and desires, but that's usually at a deep level. So when we have awareness around it and we help our clients see that you're operating in identities, and with identity work, we actually help people identify the identities, a lot of times name the identities, create a profile of the identities, and it gives us so much more to operate with. And then you recognize that in certain situations, a certain identity showed up rather than you screwed up. And then you go, okay, well, if that identity doesn't produce what I want, then I'm not going to let them drive the car next time when we get into this scenario, right? And so what happens when you do all of this, and when you do this with your clients, is you're helping regain control. And remember, control is a core human desire. Most behavior choices that we make, most addictions that we have, most compulsion that we act upon is a desire to regain control when we feel out of control. So identities work will help us regain control at a big macro level. And that'll just do so much for your ability to move and maneuver and adjust and respond appropriately, rather than just living in this world of either or, right or wrong. So that's the identities work. It's so big. You know, we plan to actually do an entire course on identities work because it's that big. But hopefully that'll give you at least enough to understand how important it is. The final ingredient is what's left, really, when we do all this work. The final ingredient is what we're trying to get to. The final ingredient is what we're diving through and untying the knots for. We're trying to uncover and discover and challenge so that we can dissolve certain things. We're trying to take off all these layers so that we can arrive at our core self. That's the final ingredient here in what we need to understand and how to truly change a life. Your core self is who you really truly are. It's not what you do. It's not what you perform. It's not what other people think of you. It's not what you think of you. It's who you really are underneath all of that stuff. In the third video of this beliefs, of this series, we were talking about beliefs. I made an analogy of a film projector, right? We see what's on the screen, but what's on the screen is determined by what's on the film. And inside the film projector, you might have to go back to the way it used to be, you know, not digital and DVDs and so forth. But if you look at a film projector, there's a film, the screen's over there, and there's light that just gets sent through the film, and whatever's on the film gets projected on the screen. Michelle and I were talking a little bit about this, and she's like, oh my God, we're the light. We are the light. That's our core self. Our core self just shines the light. But then what we see on the screen and what other people see on the screen is not actually our core self. It's whatever's on the film. And so neurotransformational coaching is really about looking at what's on the film, changing whatever can be changed, embracing whatever can't be changed, and getting as close to what's in the light as possible. Getting as close to what is the light as possible. That's our core self. I dare to say that most people have not met their core selves, because most people believe they are the film because they are the screen. Whatever is in my life and however I relate to it, that must be me. So one of the tragedies, I think, of the human experience is when we get convinced that we are our layers, that we are our identities, that we are our beliefs, that we are our behaviors. We're none of those things. All of those things are programmed into us and developed from us to protect the light. What's on the film is not actually designed to be projected outward. That's not why we create what's on the film. What's on the film is designed to protect what's coming at us from the outside. So we create these beliefs and identities and we develop these behavior patterns to protect the light. But because of that, we get so familiar with our protection that we believe we are our protection. And then we start to see ourselves from the outside. This could be a really good exercise to look yourself in the mirror and just look inside your eyes. Like, just go in there. Look directly into your eyes. Don't assess all the external. We're not our bodies either. But we have so much judgment around our bodies, and we see ourselves in this like almost like a mosaic of all the judgments that we have, and we think that that's who we are. But we're not. Our core self is inside there. And if you are willing to do this work, first of all, let me know if you're willing to do this work. I imagine if you're still watching this video and have watched any of the other videos, the answer is probably going to be yes, but don't just say yes if it's not really yes. But if you are willing to do this work to reveal and uncover and restore your core self, then it's really important for you to say it, but it's also really important for you to hear yourself say it or to see yourself type it. If you are willing to do this work, it might be, I'm not going to put this on all of you, but it might be the most terrifying thing you've ever done. Because we think we are our layers. By the way, I don't believe that it's possible for a human being to return to the core self and live in the core self all the time. I don't believe that's possible. If it is, more power to anybody that's done it. But what I do believe is we can get closer to our core self, and we can remove some of the layers that are in between our life experiences and our core self. And if we're getting closer, we're making progress. And the more that we work on it, the more progress we'll make. It's not a finish line. Like, all right, you know, and you do all this work and then you just jump into the box called, all right, my core self now. And then I'll never have to deal with all this other stuff. That's the reason I say I don't think that's possible, is because I don't want that to be your goal. I want your goal to just make progress toward your core self. But but understand that when you do, it might be scary because you're dealing with the protection, but more than that, you're dealing with familiarity. And when we remove our familiar protection, that's not fun. It's not inviting sometimes. It's not, it's threatening. because it's protection. And there's a part of me that, even as I'm saying this, there's this narrative, this editing part of me that's like, shut up, dude. Stop. You're making it sound like really hard. But it's the truth. And we don't do you any favors. We don't do anybody any favors lying to you, saying, oh yeah, this is really easy. I want you to know what you're signing up for and then sign up for it. And here's the other thing. When you sign up for something, you'll commit to it more because you signed up for it intentionally. You said, yeah, this is the road I want to go down. I want to know myself more. I want to have more fulfilling experiences in life. And let me tell you, you cannot have fulfilling experience inside the film because you're not in the film. You cannot meet the world in a big, like, if you've ever seen those sumo wrestler costumes where people put them on and then like wrestle like sumo wrestlers, and it's kind of funny. Or if you've got all these layers on you, you are not your layers. So if you meet another person and your layers interact with their layers, that cannot give you a sense of deep fulfillment because you are not your layers. You don't, there are no, it's like there's no nerve endings in the layers. So it can't get to your soul. It can't get to your heart because your heart is not in them. They're designed to protect you, which means there is a barrier of protection. So if you want to do this work, if you want to live a life of more joy and more freedom and more happiness and know who you are, then I want you to know what you're signing up for. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean it has to be excruciating. It doesn't mean it has to be miserable. Most of our misery is created from our resistance to the path. Not the path. It's our resistance to the path that creates so much of the misery. So it doesn't have to be miserable. It doesn't have to be deep and painful. Sometimes it is, and if it is, fine. But you've got to make a choice about what you're going to commit to, and you cannot commit to a life of growth and a life of comfort at the same time. I want to give you an analogy. If you think of a building on fire, we are programmed to run away from fire. Why? Because it can burn us and it can kill us and it gets really hot and it's really uncomfortable. So if we come across a building that's on fire, our natural instincts, all the programming that we have, is to turn and run away from the danger. But what if your child is in the middle of that house or building that's on fire? Where are you running? Are you running away or are you running toward? What if your pet? What if a loved one? What if something that you care deeply about is in the middle of the fire? I believe that all of us have something or someone that we would rescue from the fire. And in that moment, we are no longer concerned about only preserving ourselves because there's a reason to go into the discomfort or even potentially the danger. There's a bigger reason. My invitation to you is to recognize that your inner child is in the middle of the fire. Your core self is in the middle of the fire. So I will not tell you that it won't get hot sometimes. I will just tell you that it's worth the heat, because something on the other side of it needs to be rescued, needs to be revealed, needs to be uncovered, needs to be seen, maybe experienced by you. So the question is, what's worth going into the fire? What's worth rescuing? What most people do is try to put out the fires. Most people try to learn how to avoid the fire. Don't look at the fire. Try to become fire resistant. That's not possible. Our brains are literally designed to set fires of fear and protection. It's not possible to put out the fire, but it is possible to connect with a reason to go through it. And then what you'll probably find is the fire was all made up in the first place. Most of the time, the fire is just a construct of our imagination. And it's based on things that aren't real anyway. But we have to be willing to touch, to become aware of, and to fight for something worth rescuing. I'm going to end this video with the second concept that's so critical to understand when it comes to how to change a life. And it will build upon what I just have been talking about with the core self. It's a concept that I call arrested development. And I learned this through my nephew. So my nephew one time, well, not one time, but my nephew has, he's had a rough life, honestly. And I was talking with my mom one time about what he was doing. This is probably 15 years ago, when my mom was still alive. And we were talking about my nephew's behavior. And I was just coming from the place of like, I mean, why doesn't he just change his behavior? I don't understand. And then she reminded me of some things that I knew and told me some things that I didn't know. And what she helped me remember is that he was severely abused as a little boy by his dad. And we talked about that for a while, but the essence of the conversation for me is in that moment, I began to see my nephew not as the 30-year-old man that he was at the time, but as the 5-year-old boy that was being beaten by his dad. And then everything made sense. Everything. All the behaviors, all the relationships, all of his choices, they all made sense. Because he's been trying to cope in his life as an adult from the perspective of a young 5-year-old boy who doesn't understand why his father is beating him. So all the identities, all the beliefs, all of the patterns, all of that is coming from that wounded place. And so that started me thinking and applying that concept to other things, and eventually became this analogy that I now call arrested development. So what it looks like, if you're watching the screen, what it looks like is we are moving along in life. These are little baby footprints as we're growing in our lives. And then something happens. In my story with my nephew, the something that happened was physical abuse from his father. Whatever happens, it doesn't necessarily have to be super intense. Sometimes it is, but it doesn't have to be. But something happens that makes us believe this isn't safe, whatever this is. And as soon as we decide that something isn't safe, emotionally safe, physically safe, then we start to protect. This is where the protection begins. And we protect in 3 main areas. Self-concept, who we believe ourselves to be. This is where most of us decide that we're not lovable, that we're not valuable, that we're not wanted, that we're not protectable. So our self-concept starts to change. Our self-esteem starts to change. That's how we value ourselves. And our self-trust starts to change and or just stops. We don't trust ourselves anymore because we couldn't protect ourselves from the danger we just experienced. Therefore, we need to fix ourselves. Therefore, we need to add layers of protection. So as we continue to grow in our lives, that's when we put on all of the things that we've been talking about. That's when we're experiencing all of the beliefs, and we're building identities, and we're collecting all these memories. But all of these things are happening after the moment that we've decided this isn't safe and I can't trust myself and I probably can't trust these people around me. So we're developing skills and behavior patterns and habits, and we're developing language. All of these things are being developed inside of and because of the protection. Now, this chunk of the screen here, from the "this isn't safe" all the way up to the upper right corner, all of these footprints, this is primarily, for most of us, all of our conscious memory. We often don't even remember those little baby steps before the layers came on. So that's one of the reasons why we believe this is us. This is our life. This is who we are, because we've lived all of our conscious memory with the layers. It's why we don't know that there's a child in the burning building, because we don't remember ever being in the building when it hasn't been on fire. So that lack of memory is one of the reasons that a lot of us don't understand this concept, because it doesn't make sense to go, hey, remember who you were before you had all these layers of protection? The answer to that for almost everybody is no, I don't remember who I was before all these layers of protection. And then what happens is we do this crazy thing called, I want to better my life, and I want to get into personal development, and I want to get into self-improvement. And then at some point in time, we realize that the answer is actually to go back in time. The answer is to start removing some of these layers, start untying some of the knots, start dissolving some of the conflicts, start challenging and changing some of the beliefs. So we learned that in order to do this, we need to take off some of the lenses that we've put on that are not really us, remove some of these layers, remove some of these identities, do the real work, right? And when we make the choice to go backwards in time, in the early phases, we're excited about it because we just learned that we can actually change our life, and we're motivated by changing our life, and we're inspired, and we're watching other people, and we got the support. And a lot of times we have the money to put into it, and we're just like, all right, this is the thing that I'm going to do. And then we start to feel the discomfort as we head back toward that child in the burning building. And when we start to feel that discomfort, if you're watching the screen, you'll see the warning signs slowly get bigger and bigger and bigger. This is the process, you guys. When we start to remove some of these layers, we start to do the real work, we will experience increasing resistance most of the time. This is where most people quit. And it genuinely pains me to say that, because it's where most people are closest to the answers, closest to the child in the burning building, closest to the freedom that you wanted when you decided to make this U-turn. When we are the closest, the fire is the hottest. And it's because the entity that's just trying to protect us is now being threatened. And in the early phases, the threats just aren't that big. But when you start getting close to the source that our protective layers have been trying to protect all this time, that's like hitting the last line of defense. And that's when we will experience some of the biggest internal resistance that we'll ever experience. This is when we need support, not information. This is when we need people to lock arms with us, to hold us, to help us get back up, to tell us that we're not alone, to let us know that they've walked that journey also. That's who we need to be as coaches. We need to stand in advocacy and embodied experience to help people through that phase. This is not where people need to know the 3 C's to living an empowered life. This is not where anybody needs a meme. This is not where somebody just needs some intellectual, I'm just going to say the word that I just tried to filter out. This is not where we need intellectual masturbation to just make ourselves feel better or feel more comfortable. This is where we need support. I can't believe I just said that. This is where we need support through the process of healing. This is where we need support through the resistance. This is the work, you guys. This is the work. This is the single most important concept that as coaches, we need to get. Because if we don't understand this, and if we haven't gone through this with a coach, remember, one of the things we said in an earlier video is coaches who coach like clients are different than coaches who coach like coaches. A coach that coaches like just a coach will be like, okay, it's going to be kind of hot back there when you start heading that way, but good luck. There you go. It's like those airport workers as the plane's coming in, like, go this way, right? No, that's not a coach that's going to help somebody with this work. The coach that's going to help somebody with this work is doing this. Keep coming. Keep coming. Because I've done this work. I've crossed that bridge. I know what it's like. And my advocacy for you is going to come from where I am now, knowing what this work can do for you. A coach who coaches like a client is inviting people into what they've experienced. A coach who coaches like a coach is sending people into the danger that they didn't have the body to go into. It's entirely different. So this is the work, and it doesn't matter that you wish it wasn't. I've been teaching this for years. I hate it. I hate the fact that it's the truth because I don't want it to be the truth. I don't want to feel discomfort when I do the work. I want it to be easy. I want those 3 C's to living a fulfilled life to be all I have to do. I want to just be able to consume information and pass the test, just like I did in my schooling. That's how we want it to be. And that ain't reality. So if you are committed to changing your experience on this planet, personally and for other people, you have to be committed to doing the only work that can provide that. Intellectual information cannot provide that. It's a part of the process, but it is not the process. If you really want to help somebody change their life foundationally, and you want to help yourself change your life foundationally, you have to understand foundational life change. You have to understand what it's like to get underneath all of the human behaviors of protection and all the sabotage that's required. Now, one of the big problems in personal development is that people think that the protection is the problem. So we think our perfectionism is the problem. We think our sabotage is the problem. We think our procrastination is the problem. We think our time management issues are the problem. We think our shyness is the problem. We think our fears are the problem. None of those are problems. Those are protections. And the only thing that we would ever try to protect is something that we give a damn about. So when we ask the protective mechanism to lower its shield, just because, that's not going to work. If we tell our protective layers to just, if we just come in and go, okay, I don't want to be a perfectionist anymore, so I'm going to take a perfectionism workshop and I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to stop procrastinating tomorrow, but when I get there, I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to take away this character trait, and I'm going to do all this stuff, and I'm just going to take it away because those are the problems, and if I just got rid of all these problems, then I could live the life that I want to live. Holding on to the protection as the problem is setting up the wrong target. And you could spend 30 years learning how to hit the bullseye of the wrong target and never change your life. This is the target. Your choice is to embrace the truth or not. And then if you embrace the truth that you want a fundamental life change and that you want to be the kind of coach, an advocate, and facilitator of fundamental life change, then sign up for this path. And if you don't want to be that kind of person or have that kind of life, that is totally fine. I'm not here to shame you. I'm not saying you make the wrong choice. I would never think that you, in your perspective, should make any certain choices. But if you choose path B, do not expect the outcomes that are only available on path A. So if you choose short-term, shortcut, meme-driven personal development, do not expect a life change. Don't expect a breakthrough. Don't expect a shift in really anything significant, because those things cannot produce it. If you want to live that way, that's fine. And if that's the kind of coach you want to be, that's fine. But if you want to be a kind of coach that can change people's neurology, and this is what I always say, I'm going to end with this thought. We literally have the ability to make sounds with our mouths and change the way another human experiences the rest of their lives. What better opportunity could there be? We make sounds with our mouths, and we can change the way another human will experience the rest of their lives, and change the way they parent, and change the way they are in their relationships, and change the way they teach other people and touch other people and reach other people. It sometimes still doesn't even sound real when I hear myself say it. And that possibility is so damn amazing. We don't need to try to put sugar on it. We don't need to try to make it better by making it fast and by making it a shortcut and by telling people that we're going to do this for you. You cannot do this for anybody else, nor can anybody else do this for you. They can only support you through you doing it for yourself. That's different. You can be supported in doing the work, but you can't be substituted in doing the work. So if you're in, then jump all the way in, man, because this is insane. The possibility, it is insane. And the things that I've experienced, the things I've seen other people experience, like there are times when we see people and we go, where'd the other one go? Like, you don't look the same. And the person didn't change. They just removed some layers. This is not about changing who you are. This is about revealing who you are. It's not a path that's easy. It's not a path emotionally easy. It's not a path that's downhill. It will take effort. It will take time. It cannot be comfortable. It's impossible to be comfortable. But the view from on top of that hill, if you're willing to climb it, is something that your layers currently cannot comprehend. Because if they could, they would take themselves off. And they would say, I've been holding this human back from experiencing that. I didn't know that. I will take myself off. They can't have that perspective. But if they did, they would. So if you sign up for this journey, number one, I honor you. And I acknowledge that choice. I acknowledge you doing the real thing, the real work. This world right now that we're in needs real people doing real work to help other real people do real work. I believe that's the calling on our society right now. And it's not going to be shortcut. When anything experiences a disruption, stability needs to come from below. Stability needs to replace what was unstable from below, from inside. That's why this work has to come from inside of us. If you're willing to do it and willing to contribute to that in society, then we got a chance. For those of us that are not willing to do that work, then the best that we can do is cope with our instability for the rest of our lives. I just got pissed hearing those words. But it's the truth. So I appreciate all of your comments. I appreciate your eyeballs. I appreciate you listening. If you're still at the end of this video, I honor you. I thank you for that. But I celebrate your willingness to dive in, because this is a journey of scuba diving, not snorkeling. And when you scuba dive, by the way, there are things that you can see that are not visible from the surface of the water. I actually had somebody teach me this not too long ago. When you dive deep down into the depths, like of the ocean, there are literally creatures down there that create their own light. They don't need the sun. Most of those creatures are never seen by humans because we don't go down that deep. What if by scuba diving deep enough into ourselves, we can find that thing and touch that thing and be introduced to that thing that creates its own light? I'm getting this vision now of, if you ever been like at a waterfall and you go behind the waterfall and then you look through the waterfall. What if we went behind our film? What if we made it a point to, I want to get behind my film. I want to get behind all the layers so that I can be where the light is and I can see the other side of all the film. Even if you're just there momentarily and then life and programming and all that stuff pulls you back out, it's worth it. And then you just try to get back there again for just slightly longer. And then just try to get back there again for just slightly longer. One of the things that I've learned in this whole concept of arrested development is that there are no humans unable to heal. There are no humans that are not able to take the layers off. But almost everybody is unwilling. I think most people are unwilling is because they don't understand these concepts. They don't understand that you're actually doing it the right way. You're doing what's required. It just gets uncomfortable when you're doing it the right way because we want growth to be comfortable. I think if most people understood the actual process, but more than that, they understood what the reward is on the other side of it, most people would dive in, run into the burning building, and do everything they can to get these layers off as fast as possible to experience a kind of life that I believe most people never give themselves the experience of. So if you're that kind of person, I honor you. I can't make it a downhill path. I can't make it emotionally easy. I cannot make it comfortable. But I can support you when it gets uphill, when it gets emotionally uncomfortable, and when it gets emotionally challenging. We can support you through the truth, but we're not going to change the truth, nor are we going to lie to you and tell you that something fake is the truth. Well, hey, if you got through this whole series, that means you're excited about this kind of work. Why don't you go watch the entire first module of our online certification program for free right there. Any progress is forward momentum. Now, you might know as a coach or as a leader, you might know that, there are 12 chapters to progress.